Welcome everyone to Dovetail Learning's webinar on raising teen resilience. We're going to talk about the power of authenticity. My name is Chuck Fisher. I'm the Director of Transformational Learning at Dovetail Learning. And my co-presenter is Laurie Lusk, Teen Educator. Could you just say a few things, Laurie, about you and your background?
I work with 9th and 10th graders, and we focus on social emotional learning and gaining new skills. This week, we're working on resilience and we work on self awareness and self management. And I have to say that they are an interesting group. And if you have the opportunity to get to know teens in your family or neighborhood, absolutely take it.
Oh, I love that. Yes, and I too love working with teenagers. I worked with teenagers for about 25 years. My background is as an outward bound instructor and then a school counselor, a school psychologist, and I've run wilderness trips for teenagers for most of my life. And the last 14 years I've been with Dovetail. I'm a founding director of Dovetail Learning and currently director of transformational learning. Um, again, thank you everyone from wherever you are for being here. We'll just say a few things about Dovetail. Um, First is our mission and vision. We were created as a nonprofit to strengthen resilience in adults and children so that we could help be a part of making the world a kind and connected place for human beings. And we've borrowed this wonderful quote from the National Commission on Social Emotional Academic Development from the Aspen Institute and adjusted it just a little bit. But we envision a world in which schools where teens learn how to be the best possible versions of themselves. And we do that by creating and inventing new work and then putting it out into the world as an open education resource, or OER. What an OER is and what's true for all of the work and the work we're going to share today is that it's an open education resource, which means it's in the public domain. It is licensed by the Creative Commons across the world. You can download it for free, use it, adapt it. All we ask is that you give attribution to Dovetail, collaborate, share what you learn, and then the license requires you to share it alike if you publish it. So if you publish it, it must be published as a Creative Commons open education resource. That's our value and our stand, and we love it because we have people all over the world using We Are Resilient. What we're going to do today is just look at what is resilience, how do we define it, what is authenticity and why is that important for teenagers, and then we'll explore what does it mean to help teens raise their own resilience, raising their own resilience. Certainly something I had to do when I was a teenager. Um, So let's just go ahead and jump right in. Again, welcome to those of you who are just arriving. My name is Chuck Fisher and I'm co-presenting with Laurie Lusk. And we're going to look at a definition of resilience that I learned from Ann Maston at the University of Minnesota. It's my favorite definition. And she says, resilience is just an ordinary superpower. We all have it. It doesn't come from rare, special qualities. It's the everyday magic of being human. And if you think about it, um, Lori, how many times today have you had to be resilient, right?
Many times today.
Right. We
I
wake up,
probably can't even count.
we're on the wrong side of the bed. We have to be resilient to bring ourselves back to center. So it's from being off balance to bring ourselves back onto balance. We have a difficult conversation with a student or a colleague or a family member or a spouse, and it can throw us off base. And takes the skills of just centering ourselves, which is a big part of the We Are Resilient approach, to bring ourselves back. So we're going to talk about this with Laurie in the context of the work that you do, Laurie, with teens, but also using the framework that Dovetail Learning has created called We Are Resilient. And it consists of three parts. Mindsets, or what we call resilient mindsets of curiosity, choice, and courage. Two sets of patterns, cultural patterns and protective patterns, that both inform how we are. Cultural patterns inform our cultural resilience, but our identity. Protective patterns inform our reactive resilience, all of our reactive patterns that we all have to things. And we'll talk about those today in the context of teens. And then three sets of skills called centering skills, connecting skills, and collaborating skills for personal, relational, and group resilience. Now, there's a lot in this framework, and we're not going to talk about all of it by any means, but we'll begin by just re-referencing the 5 types of resilience, because we believe that all human beings have these 5 types operating all the time. We all have reactiveness. We all have our personal resilience. We get resilience from our relationships. Laurie and I are in a group together, and whenever I see Laurie's face come on the screen, it makes me happier because I have a relationship with Laurie, and so that feeds me. You know, the whole who wants to be a millionaire? Call a friend. Relational resilience is key to all of us, as is group resilience, collaboration, and what we learn from our culture. Um, so, authenticity. Uh, Laurie, I'm going to turn to you right now and just say, what the heck, or why does, this slide actually says what gets in the way, but I'm going to ask you a different question.
Okay.
What's so important to teenagers about authenticity? You know, I mean, I worked with all ages of students, but middle school students and high school students have the best BS meter of anyone on the planet, right?
Absolutely. We were talking about this last week that was really popular in our sessions. And the students were saying, if I'm not authentic and I'm trying to be somebody else, then I'm not going to live up to my full potential. And they've been working on their strengths all year and realize that unless they're being authentic, they can't share their strengths with their family, with their friends, with their community. And they focus on their strengths every week. It's always one strength, focus on it,
Hmm.
and focus on sharing it with others.
I love how you do that, because what you're doing is helping teens anchor to one of their resilience skills, which is their strengths, and there are all kinds of strengths that we have, that they have. But as you were talking, I was thinking about my own experience as a teenager. I had a lot of adverse childhood experiences, grew up in an alcoholic family, had emotional, sexual abuse, etc. And so the authenticity piece came into never feeling good enough. And if I couldn't be authentic, if I couldn't find a way to be my authentic self, if I had to hide in some way, um, that brought down my sense of self acceptance, self esteem, self confidence. You see that in the teens that you're working with?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've talked about is that there's one person that they spend 100% of their time with. And they'll start thinking about my mom, my dad, my best friend, and no, that person is themselves. From the time we're born, we spend 100% of the time with ourselves. And we want to become our own best friend, and they've all been working on that. Being grateful for the qualities that they have, the strengths that they have, and focusing on building that relationship with themselves. And I tell them, how many hours a week do you spend on your relationship with your best friend? Shouldn't you be spending that on yourself as well?
Hmm. Uh, that's beautiful, Laurie. It brings us right to the next slide here, which is about being oneself, being genuine, honest, true to oneself, one's spirit, one's character. Um, how do you help kids make that choice? What do you think helps kids make that choice?
That's a tough question. And sometimes we're very slow to get going. And they start with being curious about what they can do, about their interest, about what they have that's special. And sometimes I find that my students overlook this very unique quality, and maybe we've got to do some digging through some journaling or music, listening to music. Sometimes my students like to listen to instrumentals and write the lyrics to the instrumental themselves. Anything that brings them happiness that they can do to learn more about themselves and to focus on, hey, I have an interest here. I'm curious about this. I'm going to explore it. Um, Maybe this is my purpose.
Mm,
And when they connect with, I am an interesting person, I have skills, and I have a purpose, then I notice that they're more aware of themselves and they enjoy being who they are.
you're you're speaking to something that's quite profound. Uh, you know, for a teenager or for any of us to anchor in, get in touch with, be in relationship to what gives us joy. Um, of course, opens our heart. And as a facilitator for HeartMath Institute and the whole science behind neurocardiology and the science of the heart, what happens when those teens access their music or their sport or their writing or themselves in in a presencing, they can really presence that, is all their neurology changes and they become literally in harmony internally as their heart beats in a different way. So authenticity is powerful, and we are also talking about strengths. So we're going to look at strengths at the end, but first we're going to look at the protective patterns, which are part of the We Are Resilient approach. Protective patterns are those reactive patterns that we all have, and it's really important to normalize that we have these protective patterns. They're ways we react. It helps us normalize and humanize. Um, and these are the protective patterns that we teach at Dovetail Learning through the We Are Resilient approach, that we all have ways in which we distrust or get hypervigilant or hyper caretaking of another person, or ways we avoid things and defend ourselves, or sometimes we just jump back and react and attack. And I'm going to go through all 6 of these very briefly. And what I want you to think about, Laurie, is how does it help teenagers to understand that this is going on inside them, these protective patterns. So I'll be very uh, brief, and feel free to jump in as I go. But every one of us has distrusting. We live inside of distrusting at certain times when we doubt ourselves or we doubt others. Um, when we have to be hyper vigilant and being on constant high alert. That was key for me growing up in an alcoholic family. I had to always know where my dad was and what his mood was in order to uh, basically survive my day by being hyper vigilant. The next two are hyper caretaking. Do I over prioritize others? Give myself away. I mean, working with teenagers for so many years, you see those kids who give themselves away at their own expense by our over prioritizing others. And then fourth, by avoiding, withdrawing, retreating. We all need to do that to protect ourselves at different times during the day or during our life. Um, and then lastly, it's normal that we feel judged and criticized. We all have a self-critic. We all have self-esteem. And for a teenager to understand that being defensive is part of the human condition, that's can be a game changer, as well as seeing that some people are really quick to attack and be reactive. Um, all of this, comes down to every human being having absolutely impeccable reasons for being exactly who they are. One of the things that I found teenagers needed to understand most about their parents, about themselves, about their friends, about their teachers. Uh, you know, People all show up this way. Um, so, how do these protective patterns impact the teens that you work with in relationship to being authentic?
When they first learned about the protective patterns, I'm going to say they were telling me like a light came on because when we're stressed out and it's been a really tough, challenging day, and here's this reactive pattern. Maybe it's avoiding. Well, then sometimes there's some harsh negative self talk. Why did I avoid? Well, now they understand. Okay, that was my reaction. And everybody has this reaction. My parents do, my grandparents. Um, the protective patterns aren't just unique to a certain age group. Everybody has a protective pattern that they put up. And when they understood it, then they could catch the pattern when they didn't want to do something, so maybe take a test they didn't study for. Rather than avoid, immediately they can recognize, okay, this is the protective pattern. This is where maybe I need to take some deep breaths. And whether I'm prepared or not, I committed that I'm taking this test and now I need to do it.
I love how you said they can catch the pattern. I had this image in my mind of a big butterfly net. It's like, okay, I'm having a reaction. When I catch the pattern, I can step back from myself and I can see that there's a pattern happening. It's not me, it's just the pattern, and that gives me choice. What a beautiful thing to give to teenagers. I wish I had had this model when I worked with teenagers. uh, 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 Anything else that you'd like to say, Lori, about protective patterns and how it helps kids
I think the
and
protective
people in their
patterns have, if you would ask um, the students at our school, I think they would all agree that the protective patterns will be something that they're going to take with them throughout life. And realizing that I can pause when I feel this um, need to maybe avoid or defend, and I can be curious and get more information. And if I can notice the pattern, um, that reactive pattern, I can stop it and I don't have to let it become full blown.
You're talking about self-awareness, and teenagers being able to monitor and assess and consider and work with their own protective patterns. As you were talking, I was also thinking about how it helps teenagers understand others. Um, it would have helped me a lot if I'd known the protective patterns and seen that my dad was an attacker. I mean, it wouldn't have changed everything, but at least it would give me a context to put his behavior into. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze for a second. Maybe I can hold it. Um, and How do you see that operating with teens and their friendships?
A lot of times, I think teens get so hurt when a friend agrees to do an activity, go to the movies with them on a Saturday afternoon, but then they don't show up. And then either they're hurt, they're blaming themselves, and feel rejected. But that it might not be rejection. It could be that their friends also have a protective pattern and they've had a stressful day that they need to deal with, and maybe they just reacted and avoided instead of talking about it and connecting.
Hmm, beautiful. Well, let's turn toward that. We've talked a little bit about protective patterns, and what I'm hearing in our conversation is that knowing about their protective pattern actually raises their resilience. That having a context, and I'll put up a different slide here for us to just be with for a minute, um, gives teenagers a way to understand each other and their family and their world. Um, I like to call it the human condition. We all have protective patterns. But we also have a lot of other things that give us strength. Um, and What do you think is the most key thing for a teenager to get or understand?
Connecting not only with peers, believe it or not, parents, grandparents, their family, they really want that close family relationship and they want to feel like they belong and they're supported. And although, yes, I know they can be strong willed at time, sometimes I see the need for guidance. And I think they still want that gentle hand of maybe a grandparent or a parent, sort of guiding them through the teen years.
Uh, you're speaking to something that I've talked a lot about in terms of a myth around teenagers. There's a myth that teenagers don't want to connect with adults and that they need to separate themselves. And of course, there's a developmental stage in which they need to own themselves and find themselves and have the confidence of being themselves. But I love what you just said, because what I found is that teenagers are hungry for that connectedness with their teachers, but especially with their parents. And a whole another special category is their friends and peers. All the teenagers that I worked with, I shouldn't say all, most or many of the teenagers that I worked with as a psychologist who were struggling with eating disorders and depression and self-cutting and all the, everything, the drugs and alcohol, etc., um, often went back to a break in a connection with one or both of their parents. The other thing that I discovered in my own research when I did my dissertation, on what helps teenagers gain self-acceptance, and I had a lot of theoretical posits, and I was surprised to discover that what they get the most self-acceptance from, and it makes sense, is hearing other kids be authentic about their own stories and their own lives. So if you tell me that you have a protective pattern of being defensive and I have that protective pattern, well, I feel better because, okay, I'm not alone. Or you tell me that you're having trouble with your in your family, then I can feel okay about my family, or you know, whatever your story is. When teens get a chance to be authentic with each other, they just thrive on that sense of belonging and connection, um, and uh, and acceptance. Well, let's think about the resilient mindsets, if we could, because I know you're working with teens and those mindsets, um, and you know, we've got curiosity. Um, we've got pictures for each of this. You know, how being curious about self and others. How am I being? What don't I know? What's going on? Choice. What are the empowering choices that I can make in my life? And courage. What kind of person do I want to be?
With curiosity, we've lately focused on even being curious about mistakes. They happen, we all make them. And sometimes we can learn more if we make a mistake and sit back and use it as an opportunity to learn more about ourselves. And so we make a mistake. Everybody does. And anybody who says, I didn't make a mistake ever, never, they probably aren't being truthful.
Well, you know, we all know in learning theory that mistakes are the heart of learning. Uh, but how do you help teenagers get curious about their mistakes?
Well, I tell them you have two choices. You can feel bad and worry about this past mistake, but unless we have a time machine, we can't go back there and change it. But we can be curious about it and learn from it and move on to the future. And with all that great knowledge that we have, that everything that we learned from that mistake.
Hmm. I think teenagers are, you know, all children are some of the most curious animals on the planet. Um, and just having that mindset of inviting teenagers to have the mindset of curiosity and helping them unpack, well, what exactly is that? You know, just to let go of preconceived ideas and to be able to really lean into what the heck's going on? You know, what the heck's going on in me, or what the heck's going on that I got that so wrong? You know, and then go on the journey of discovery. It might, you know, be internal journey, might be talking with a friend journey, it might be going back to their teachers and having a conversation, instead of, like you said, having that dread and feeling like, oh, I'm so wrong. Really learning that mistakes are the fruit of learning. Thanks for that. Really great. Now, you and I were talking earlier about choice, um, and helping teenagers understand choice. What are you noticing about that conversation?
This conversation is more difficult because many students, and my students are younger because they're ninth and 10th graders, they don't realize they have a choice. So I tell them, let's take it slowly. You do have choices. You can talk to your counselor. You have choices about what classes you want to take next year. And most of all, you have choices about your own behavior. You can choose to act in a certain way, or you can choose to take some self care time, do some breathing, and be curious and notice and choose to see what you thought was going to be a disaster in a completely different positive way.
Hmm. Um, yeah, you're talking about positive reframing also, in terms of looking at life as glass half full versus half empty. And you know, positive psychology teaches us so much about that. Um, and this idea that we have choice about how we respond or how we behave or how we even feel, uh, you know, having the protective patterns language can help, I think, teenagers understand, oh, I'm having a reactive pattern and there's a choice here. I can do something different. Um, well, let's go to the next one. We've got three resilient mindsets that we teach about: curiosity, choice, and courage. Um, Courage is my favorite. Um, and What do you notice about how teenagers approach this idea of courage?
This one's harder. With courage, I always tell them just take small steps. Even a half a step is progress. Um, Getting to know themselves and taking that time to spend with themselves, um, and deciding what they really want to do and um, going after it. Even if it doesn't work out, you learned something from it. So it did work out. But it's just that courage to take that step forward, to investigate. And at 14, 15 years old, you don't have to know what you're going to do with the rest of your life, but you can move forward and research different things that you are interested in and
You're,
build up your
you're,
own skills.
you're talking about sort of the world of, that they have to navigate and become something in. Let's bring it back to the day to day, or even within a day, the moment to moment courage that it takes. And There's a tagline here under courage. It says, "What is my heart telling me?" Courage comes from the root word core, which means heart. Uh, and we like to teach courage that it is following our heart. Um, what kind of conversations, or how do you see this working inside teenagers that, maybe they have a break in a relationship with a friend? Um, how does courage help them step back into that relationship? Or I'm kind of giving you a leading question, but what do you notice?
We've talked about relationship skills and maybe uh, we take a look at it like in your heart, you know that this relationship with your best friend is worth something to you. And just because there were harsh words doesn't mean the relationship is over. Maybe you need to step back. Maybe you need to be the one to ask, hey, I've noticed that this relationship isn't doing so well right now. What can we do to build this up? And a lot of times, it takes a lot of courage to do this as well, to be the person who is very honest and vulnerable and will say, this friendship, this relationship means a lot to me. And I want to move forward
That is such
and build a
powerful.
stronger connection.
That is such a powerful statement for a young person, for any of us to say, our relationship is so important to me. I want to work this out with you. That's courage. It's vulnerability, and we like at Dovetail. We like to ask the question, what kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to be the kind of person who loses relationships and drops them off, people who have mattered, or do I want to be a person who can, is a friend? Um, I can think of countless times in my counseling office, as a school counselor, working with teens and middle school students, where there's a break in a friendship, um, and they almost always are just angry because they're missing their friendship. They care about it so much, they want it, but sometimes their anger gets in the way. So using curiosity and having choice, and thinking about it in terms of what's their heart saying to them, uh, can make all the difference in the world. Any other thoughts about courage?
The question that you have at the bottom of this slide, it says, "What kind of person do I want to be?" And many times I've heard students say, "I want to be the kind of person that helps others."
Oh, wow. Yeah. Isn't that just the human spirit speaking? Um, People want to help others. We are hardwired for connection, for socialization, and it's loneliness can be sad, and helping others, contributing. It's actually the number one resilience factor in Bonnie Bernard's research, which is contribution. And we can contribute to someone else by helping them. Wow, we all feel good about that, don't we? Well, let's think about at the end here, we've got just less than 10 minutes. Go through the centering skills and think about how the centering skills help teenagers feel empowered and resilient and strong. And each of these skills is an anchor. Centering is for personal resilience. For those of you new to this approach, this idea of centering and connecting and collaborating came out of my work in Aikido. I'm a black belt in Aikido. And in martial arts, the only way to have power is to center yourself. You have to center yourself. If someone's coming and attacking you, if you try and push back, then it becomes an arm wrestling match. But if you center yourself first, then you have all the choice in the world and all the power and ability to move. So we call these centering skills, how we create our own world through these 6 skills. There are many others, of course. Laurie and I were talking earlier, and listening to music isn't on this list, but it's a great centering skill. It gives us resilience. And we talk about noticing the impact of awareness, self-awareness, breath, letting go of things that we're not in control of and not being on it. Using gratitude as a skill, positive reframing, which we already talked about, looking at life with a glass half full, comes out of positive psychology, and then nurturing myself. So we've got time to just say a little bit about each of these, and then we'll be closing with some final information. With noticing myself, we say, pause, what's the cause? Laurie?
We talked about this today because it's final exam time and everyone is stressed out. So, the challenge of the week is to pause and ask, what's the cause? Am I stressed out because I didn't prepare? Just taking a few minutes to notice, where did this tension come from and what's causing it, and what can I do to bring myself back to the present?
Wow. Um, I'm missing the kinds of conversations you're getting to have with teenagers. It's so fun, isn't it? To enter into their world and see how creative and alive they are to get consciousness, really. I mean, that's what noticing myself is. It's about being conscious of what the heck am I doing to myself? What's the story I'm telling myself? And what can I do about it? And the next centering skill is we call breathing mindfully, breathing deeply, feeling it completely. You talked about doing mindful breathing in your classes for 3 minutes. What do your kids say about that?
Well, the first thing they noticed is that when they get upset, maybe staying up all night cramming for an exam, the breathing tends to be really shallow, and how it made such a big difference to breathe in through their nostrils and then out through their mouth. And not just once or twice, but we put on a song and we'll go through the entire song just breathing. And I always hear that, wow, that made a big difference. And I didn't think that it would because it was almost too simple to work. But wow, what a change.
It's just the simplest thing, isn't it? To feel the breath in our body, just right now as we sit here, just to take a breath and feel the sensation of the breath in our lungs and our heart. It changes us neurologically, literally. The heart, the space between the heartbeats starts shifting and adjusting and becoming coherent and in harmony with itself. So much we could say about that, but not enough time. We've got a few more minutes, so let's go to the next skill. This one is called letting go, which, and what the tagline we have for this is set free what burdens me. There's so much that we get upset about that's not in our control, whether it's, whether we, for a teenager, I don't know if the ninth and 10th graders are driving yet, but can they use the car tonight? Well, the car's not available, so they're all upset, but in fact, they don't have any choice about that. It's out of their control completely. And then how do we learn how to distinguish that? What's completely out of my control that I'm still upset about that I can just let go and put in my trash can and be free of that burden?
We've um, had a circle and then we'll draw a smaller circle in the middle. And everything that's in the smaller circle is within our control. And then everything outside are those things that they're just not in our control and there's nothing we can do about them. And I'm not sure if they really do this, but I always say, okay, if you're having a problem letting something go, put your circle up on the wall where you can see it to remind yourself, this
Mm,
is out of my control. I can't break my curfew. My parents said I've got to be home at 10 o'clock.
mm,
I'm going to be here at 10 o'clock.
mm. That's beautiful. I love the way you bring experiential learning into your classrooms, and have them have that tactile, visual sense of drawing the circle and seeing, where is this issue? Is it in my control or not? To help them let it go. So we've got a few more centering skills, and I like to end on time, so I'm going to just pop through these a little bit differently. Um, you know, Helping kids just access their gratitude. You know, it's such a powerful act. Um, I don't know if you have helped them do gratitude journals, um, or just doing a circle and having each person say something they're grateful for. So many ways to bring that in. Um, if you have specific examples, feel free. We've got enough time for that.
We
Um,
had fill our heart.
oh,
And yeah, so they could color it, be creative, and then write what they're grateful for
mm,
inside the heart.
mm, um, thank you, Laurie. And then positive reframing, which is really about the glass half full, changing the view. We have perspective, we have stories. Uh, I had a story this morning that my wife forgot to do something that was important, and I was all upset about it. And when I finally talked to her, my story was completely wrong. So how do we change our stories so that we can get it right? Um, and then lastly, just put up nurturing myself. And there's so much to talk about here because it's all about nurturing body, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, community, relationship health. There's so much that there is for us to nurture, and so many ways to do it. Um, um, I would just say, what last words would you like to say Laurie about using this material with teenagers on this slide. And then I have one more.
For the nurturing, I tell them to always consider self-care is not selfish, it's essential. That's how we replenish ourselves, with taking that time, even if it's 20 minutes, to nurture yourself.
You know, you said the exact same words that Nadine Burke Harris says. She's was the former Surgeon General of California, talking about nurturing to pediatric providers, and how important it is. And it's not selfish. It's, as we all say, putting on the oxygen mask first. Um, well, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, Laurie. It's a pleasure
Thank
having
you.
everyone on this webinar. I want to just let you know you can go to dovetaillearning.org and download any of our materials. We have circles and trainings and other webinars that are all recorded on YouTube. You can see many other webinars. We do sell a hard copy of materials as well as all the free materials, and you can reach me at chuck@dovetaillearning.org if you have any questions. And Laurie, it's been a pure pleasure doing this with you. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
today.
you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
And I want to thank everyone who's here from wherever you are, and invite you to take the Dovetail Learning material and make it your own. That's how we designed it as an open education resource. You can take it, you can use it, and just let us know how you use it, because that makes us happy that we've been able to contribute. So with that, we will close this webinar. And thanks everyone for being here.